Hi, I'm Howard Tipton, Town Manager of Longboat Key. And today we're going to talk on Tip Talks. We're going to talk about hurricane season. Now, we've talked about getting ready for hurricane season. Now what we're going to do is talk about what the town does as we approach an actual storm event. And so with me today is our Fire Chief, Paul Dezzi, and he acts as our emergency manager. We have our Public Works Director, Isaac Brownman, and we have our Police Chief, George Turner. And so each of them have important roles along with their teams as we are approaching a storm event. So again, we've talked about what you need to be doing, and as a reminder, that's you have a plan. Make sure you know what to take with you and where you're going. So that's already been covered. Now we're going to talk about, hey, we're 72 hours out, and what is the town doing? And then as we get into the storm, and then after the storm, we'll talk a little bit about that. But first, gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Paul, we're going to start with you as our emergency manager. You're kind of the quarterback for us in these storm events. So talk a little bit about your role in emergency management.
Well, emergency management is a position that we work throughout the year. What we do is we work with our department heads and their employees, making sure that they're all ready for the storm and making sure everybody knows what position they are, what role and responsibility they have during a storm. So what I do is I try to coordinate with the department heads and yourself during a storm. We monitor the storms as they approach, and we usually know about 7 days out as this is approaching. But we work with both Manatee and Sarasota County, and we try to incorporate all of their thinking as far as, are they evacuating? Are they thinking about evacuating? So we work with both counties during the process, but most importantly is we work with Sarasota County for the operational side. After that storm passes, then we work with Manatee. But during the storm or preparing for the storm, we want to make sure that everybody here has a plan, just like the residents have a plan. We need to have a family plan. So we stress that to all the employees.
Yeah. That's a great point. And one of the things that you mentioned is we wear different hats. So when a storm hits, you're not the fire chief, or you're still the fire chief, but you also have an emergency management coordinator kind of hat that you're wearing, incident commander. We all have different areas of responsibility that tie basically back into our daily tasks, but it's different. And we work under an incident command system, an ICS model, and so people in their day jobs may be doing something very different than what they would normally do in a storm event. So I appreciate that. And you mentioned the challenges or opportunities that we have in being a part of two counties, because they can have very different approaches to evacuations and to reentry and to what happens in between. So it's great that it's a year-round process, because it really takes building those relationships, opening up those communication channels to make sure that we're all on the same page. So now, Isaac and Chief Turner, I want to just talk a little bit about your roles and the things that you focus on as you think about getting ready for a storm, just in the overview, and then we'll talk about 72 hours out and we'll kind of go through the storm from there.
Sure. Thank you, Tip. So in Public Works, obviously there's a flurry of activity as a storm begins to approach. We're monitoring constantly, in constant communication with the emergency manager, watching what the storm's doing, and it puts Public Works into action to start double checking our infrastructure and equipment, our utility water and wastewater system, making sure that all the stations are operating as they should be. All our generators are functional and ready to go, to be pre-positioned. Throughout the year, the town has done a great job to have pre-positioned debris management contracts. So if we have a massive debris clearing exercise, that's obviously would overwhelm the town's resources. We have contractors that come in and do the clearing for us, which is pretty common in many communities, but we maintain those contracts constantly. We'll do things like sandbag operations. We'll make sure that the town's fueling facilities are all topped off for that entire period until the storm hits, even till the day before, if we can get the fuel trucks out here. So there's a lot of activity that goes on in preparation for a storm, watching the storm, and then when the storm hits, and then coming back for a recovery mode.
Yeah, it's a great point on the fuel piece. One of the things that we've learned over time is we really have to be ready for about 3 days before we can expect any real assistance, because there could be other priorities that the counties and the state are dealing with. So we want to make sure that we're not a burden on anybody and we've got the resources that we need to get stuff done. So Chief Turner, from a security perspective, from a traffic perspective, trying to make sure that we maintain a flow off the island, especially as we get into kind of an evacuation mode.
Right. Well, in addition to our normal call volume, which obviously increases a bit with the upcoming storm, is getting our equipment ready, filling up our fuel tanks, making sure the boats are secure and or off the lifts and into a secure facility somewhere, making sure all of our people have a plan in place already so that they can take care of their families at home, move them where they're going to be safe so that they can come back to work prior to us moving them to a AB squad to have more personnel on duty.
Yeah, and the AB Alpha Bravo, so it's just basically day and night.
Sure, and we'll call the entire department in. They'll be split in 2 squads. Days off obviously canceled, vacations canceled. We monitor the storm. We work very closely with the other department heads in the town to make sure that we get all our buildings secure. We have a few other issues we have to take care of, making sure we know where we're putting our evidence, hoping that the major storm doesn't hit us, but if it does, that we're protecting all our evidence for court and all our equipment off island.
Sure, so that's a great point. And from a town's perspective, we make sure that we have a backup way of making sure that we can pay the bills, pay our employees, just in case town hall gets hit. And
we also we plan for being able to feed our people, being able to sleep somewhere, the general necessities that are going to be required later.
Great. All right, so we have a general idea, and we've been training for this throughout the year. We've been talking about it. Now we've got a storm that has us in its crosshairs. We're, let's say we're 72 hours out. And so, Chief, what are we doing?
Well, what we try to do, and we do, is get with all the department heads. We have either a phone call with everybody, or we'll have a in-person meeting, and we just start laying out the rules of what we need to do. Every department has a plan, so that's one of the things we do during the year, is make sure that plan's up to date. What we hope that these we stress to the department heads is the importance of having that plan implemented quickly. So we do have plans 72 hours out, 48 hours out, 24 hours out, and of course, ground zero. So at 72 hours, we meet, we discuss what we need to do. As far as the fire department is concerned, our priority is going to be making sure we have the supplies ready, like these other guys were saying, as far as the fuel. We have medication we have to make sure we're ready. We have narcotics we have to secure. We have these computers and throughout the town that we have to lift up off the floor. We have to get ready for any water that comes in. So communicating with the department heads, making sure that they have their plan implemented at the 72-hour mark. And then if anybody had any concerns or questions, we make sure we have those answered. Along with that, it was mentioned earlier about sheltering. We make sure that we move our employees that are being called back. That would be Public Works, Police, and Fire to Sarasota High School. We move them to that shelter, make sure that shelter is ready to go. At 72 hours, we go and walk the halls, make sure we know where we're going to go, what we need there. And then at the EOC, we begin to go to the EOC, which is the Emergency Operations Center in Sarasota. We begin to start putting people in that area right away at 72 hours. So we operate out of that area and then monitor the storm. We get with the town manager, let him know where we are with what's going on, and then a decision is then made at the 48-hour mark.
Okay, great. And usually somewhere around the 48, 72 hour, we get either a presidential declaration of emergency or at least one from the governor at that point. And so we're working under emergency authorization, which allows us to, if we needed to procure things, we can do it a little bit faster. It allows us to just make sure we can do the things that we need to do. Also opens up the state resources to us as well. So excellent. So we've talked about 72 hours out. I think we've covered that. Now, one of the things that can happen, Isaac, is that our water and wastewater is provided to us. The water coming to us is from Manatee County, and we send the wastewater back to be treated in Manatee County. And so in a storm event, they may shut that water off. How much notice do you usually get in advance of that decision?
So, Tip, thank you. That's very important. We stay in constant communication with Manatee County when an event is approaching. And so we are coordinating with them as to when they plan to shut off water. They typically will not shut off the water until the last possible moment when it's still safe for their employee to go to a valve out on the islands and turn that valve off. And usually we've been seeing about 12 to 18 hours before a projected landfall. That gives time for our folks to continue to finalize their evacuation. Hopefully our residents have evacuated before that. But Manatee County does have a policy of shutting off the water supply completely. What we do at Public Works is we fill our water storage tanks before they do that, so they're completely full. So there is somewhat of a water supply, but we ask residents to follow those evacuation orders because we don't want to have that water used up. It could be used for fire protection if something happens after the event. So we fill our tanks before Manatee County shuts off the water. We're in constant communication to find out when they're going to do it. And they work very hard to do it at the last moment before the winds get too high and they put their employees in danger. So I'd say 12 to 18 hours in advance, maybe 24 if the storm slows down, but we stay in constant contact with them. And all the while, our team is checking our tanks, our systems, our equipment, the wastewater systems, our generators, our bypass pumps to make sure if we lose power, which is typically happens in a storm, although we are hardening our island with the undergrounding project, we have the right generators in the right places to handle it after the event.
Perfect. So Chief Turner, when we talk about evacuation that Isaac just mentioned, so an evacuation order has been mentioned. We didn't talk about how strong this storm might be, but let's say it's anticipated to be a 2, but we know in recent history these things can blow up and all of a sudden become a 5 in 12 to 18 hours. And so we're not messing around, we're saying we need to evacuate. From a traffic management perspective, you're coordinating with the other departments because we are an island and we have to travel through other places to get back to the mainland. You're coordinating with those other agencies.
Yes, sir, we are. Manatee County, Braden Beach borders us on the north, Sarasota PD on the south. We're in constant contact with their chiefs and their personnel. Holmes Beach, Manatee County Sheriff, and Sarasota Sheriff. The plan at that point, we had already gone to the AB squads. We would have additional manpower other than our normal patrols because the normal calls for service still happen. And the additional officers on the road would be helping with the evacuation, trying to get all the stores closed up and the people that work in the stores off the island. Getting right down to using loudspeakers and going up and down the roadways, telling people that it's a mandatory evacuation. We strongly suggest that they leave, trying to follow that up with any senior citizens that may be in need of assistance, along with the fire department, trying to get those people off the island. Again, double checking that all our personnel have already taken care of their families because they know that they're on duty now until the storm has passed. So they need to make sure their families are taken care of, their dogs, their animals, their homes, everything's done.
So again, let me just mention that when an evacuation order is given, try to get out as soon as you can. Make sure you understand where you're going. You don't have to evacuate to North Carolina to be safe, but you need to get off of this island because once the winds get above a certain level, we're not going to have any way to respond and try to provide assistance to you until after those winds die back down. So we saw what happened with Hurricane Ian. We saw what happened in Sanibel and Fort Myers Beach. These storms are more powerful and stronger in their intensity, and this is just not something to play with. If you think you've been through a hurricane before, unless you were at ground zero, you have not been. And so it's just, and when I talk about leaving early, I also mean because the winds can build up the water in the bay, we may see some flooding on the roads that may prevent you, as you know, could be 10 hours before the storm is actually here, and the roads are already flooded because of the way the winds are driving the water and stacking up in the bay, which then creates a cascade of problems. So if you get the chance, make sure as soon as that evacuation order is given, that's when you get on the road, not in the last minutes. So gentlemen, we now have a situation where the storm is upon us. We are off the island. We are buttoned up as best as we can. We're over at the Sarasota High School, and we are riding it out. And that's what we do, right? We just ride it out. We're not out patrolling or doing anything. We're riding it out. Now, the winds, and again, we're taking our cues from the counties, because the way that emergency management rolls up is it goes from the feds to the state to the counties, and then the counties to the cities or towns. And so we're taking our cues from them. But now the winds have started to subside. The worst of it is over. What are the first things that we start to do as we think about getting back on the island to check things out?
Well, what we want to do first is make sure we come back on the island when it's daylight. That's the first thing. We go ahead and do a recon. We may send a team out when the sun's actually coming up, getting our team at the Sarasota High School together, which would be the fire department, the police department, public works. We'll leave that location and start heading out towards the island. What our goal is to clear the main roads from south to north, and then from that point we then split off and we start opening up the roads along the Gulf of Mexico Drive. So communication is very important. There may be areas through the recon that we may not be able to get into. So what we're trying to find out is how bad did Longboat Key get hurt? So we have to figure that out. And that information from the recon unit will come back to the EOC, and then we'll go ahead and make a determination what other resources are needed out there. Are we able to get back on by land? Do we have to come in by water? So these things we have to figure out through the recon process.
You mentioned that, and you mentioned getting that debris off the road, and Isaac, that's really where your team comes in, right? The fire and police can't get to where they need to get to until we have the roads cleared.
That's right. So it's very important to establish the first push. And the first push operation is to essentially open a single lane on every roadway in the town so that our emergency services, our police can get in and see what's going on, help where it's needed, and provide access to all the areas. At the same time, our utility crews then come out once that access is established and it's determined to be safe. We'll begin checking all our wastewater stations and our water systems to see the integrity of the system, if it's still there, if there's any leaks that need to be repaired before an authorization for people to return is issued to come back to the island. We need to make sure that the water and sewer systems have some level of integrity before people start coming back.
So you mentioned coming back on the island for the general population. So there's 3 tiers that really we look at. And the first one is making sure our first responders and our public works team kind of get over and kind of do that initial assessment. How bad is it? Then, Chief, the next 2 tiers involve selected people at the second tier. And describe a little bit about what happens there.
Okay, well, we're going to have, when both Manatee County and Sarasota County decide to open, if they open earlier than we're ready, then we'll be blocking off the roadways on both ends of the bridges. Tier 1 people will be here already. Tier 2 and 3, depending on the severity of the damage on the island, will be determined by the emergency manager and the town manager. My people will be handing out, checking IDs, finding out who these people are, what their job is, and what tier do they fit in. They will be given stickers for the inside of their windshields. So the first time when we greet them at the bridge, we'll know who they are. The second time, we don't have to keep stopping traffic to find out who they are or if they're authorized.
And so the second tier folks are people like maybe Publix, maybe it's CVS, maybe some of the larger properties on the island that have property managers and looking to kind of assess the situation for the individuals.
Right, not the general population or the general employees, but the people that are in charge, the people that are going to open up their stores, determine if they can open, people that actually support us before the next group comes in.
Yeah. Important for the public to know, if you haven't been told that you are part of the tier 2, then you are not, right? That means that you're tier 3. And tier 3 is the last piece. And I want to make sure that we understand that we will open up the island when it is safe to do so. And that includes not only having the roads, but making sure we understand the structures and making sure that we understand that we have water and wastewater and electricity. Those are all important components of people coming back onto the island and resuming normal activities. And if we've really been hit, then there has to be an understanding of some patience, because we have a lot of work to do in order to make sure that things are set. We're not going to allow any looting. We're very much in charge of the security of the island, but your safety is paramount. We don't want to start losing people coming back onto the island early after we've already gone through the storm. So we want to make sure everybody's safe. We want to make sure that we're ready for the activity levels that we can support. So Chief, as we're now getting into Tier 3, people coming back onto the island, as we're starting to move to a recovery phase, what are some of the things that you're working with between the Emergency Operations Center and the team here?
Sure. So what we want to do is we want to work with our PZB office. We'll have disaster assessments done, determine how much damage we do have on the island, and also determine if these buildings are safe for people to return. If we find out that we have any issues with stability or construction of the residents, they're going to be marked that they cannot go back into these homes. So we're working with both counties, and at this point, recovery phase, both Manatee and Sarasota County, with recovery. As far as, do we have to have sheltering for residents? We have to find other locations for them. We have homes already available that we could bring these people to. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on within the recovery phase of it, including working on permits. Permits is something where PZB will be responsible for. Are we able to do our operations of the town here? If not, we have contract for the State College of Florida to use Building 18 at that location to where we can resume our operations. So these things we're looking at the Emergency Operations Center in Sarasota to determine what do we actually have to do once we get back out here from the recovery phase.
A lot of what we do too is working with FEMA and the state at that level. And it's important to know that we've all had the training, we all understand what we need to do. Documentation is very critical for everything that we do so that we can be reimbursed as much as possible in a declared emergency event. Also understand that the damage on the island could be different depending on where you are on the island. Obviously, we have some lower lying areas, might see more of that water inundation than maybe some of the higher levels. Now, we only have the top height is 12 feet on the island, so there's not a lot of height difference. But if you're at 1 foot, you could see a lot of water coming in up from the bay as the water kind of backs up. So, we've got to check not only the houses and the streets and the power and the water and the utilities, we're also checking the beaches, because that's our first line of defense. We want to understand how the beach is held, because oftentimes if you're in the middle of hurricane season, now you've got to start thinking about, if we get another storm, what do we need to be doing? How do we need to think about what's next as we get through the season? So, well, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for your expertise and commitment to the security and safety of our residents. You've got the experience. I think we've all been through a storm or two or 5 at this point. And so, it's comforting to know that we've got the trained team in place that can make that response and take the steps necessary to protect people and property to the best extent that we can. And for the folks at home, understanding what we're doing, we just need you to make sure that you're listening to the media posts, the website information, keeping track of the media briefings at the Emergency Operations Center so that you know what we're doing, because we're going to be communicating through those outlets to you so that you understand the steps that we're taking, the evacuations, if there is one that needs to take place, and then as we talk about recovery and the return to the island, the steps that we're going to be taking to ensure your safety as you get ready to come back. So those are all things that we're doing before, during, and after the storm. And so we just wanted to share a little bit behind the scenes with you as to how all of that works. And that's what we've got for this hurricane season. Hopefully everything that we've talked about, we never have to use. But if we do, we're ready. So that's our message for today. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, be well.